You want a war? You're gonna get one.
Now get the guns, the drugs from my generation. I'll take the fall, the saints, and across the nation. And it's a sex, the gods, the freaks, the fraud, they're messing with me. Come on, come on, come on, let's get it out. Move to the music, play that fucking music. Live through my music, yeah.
Welcome back to Reliving the War, and welcome to the 22nd of July 1996. Nitro is live once again from Disney's MGM Studios this week, and Raw is also live, coming from the Key Arena in Seattle, Washington. We've got the international incident results to look at first, so let's get to it. In Your House International Incident took place on July 21st, 1996, live from Vancouver. A reported 14,800 fans were in attendance for the show, which was more than both Beware of Dog shows combined. The Body Donnas defeated the Smoking Guns in our opening contest. Zip and Skip announced before the match that their manager Cloudy was now gone. It's another slap in the face for those who sent in their resumes, photos and videos a few weeks back, like Apollo the Bastard here. Billy Gunn was more concerned about Sonny and he didn't focus on the match, leading to Zip and Skip scoring a win. Keep in mind that this was a non-title match. Mankind then defeated Henry Godwin in a singles match. This was supposed to be Mankind versus Jake Roberts, but Jake was apparently injured. It's never been confirmed if Jake no-showed the event or if the WWF intentionally kept Jake off the show to further his storyline with Jerry Lawler, but either way, the King would completely destroy Jake on commentary throughout this matchup, and this would all lead to a match between Roberts and Lawler at next month's SummerSlam event. Mankind gets the win with the Mandible Claw. Steve Austin then defeated the Wildman Marc Mero in our next matchup. This one was actually pretty decent, and Mero's Stone Cold Stunner Bump was pretty good too. Steve Austin's rise up the WWF ladder continues, and a certain superstar was paying attention from his home in Calgary, Alberta. The Undertaker had Goldust defeated in their match when he delivered a Tombstone Piledriver, but Mankind appeared from under the ring, so the Phenom wins via disqualification. Moments later, The Undertaker emerged from the other side of the squared circle, and Mick Foley and the Deadman fought their way back to the arena boiler room. This would also set up a match for the SummerSlam show. The six-man tag featuring Kemp Cornette versus Shawn Michaels, Ahmed Johnson and Psycho Sid was a fun main event, and the crowd was seriously pumped up for this one. They were literally falling over the guardrails during Shawn Michaels' entrance, and the fans went nuts for Ahmed Johnson and Psycho Sid also. In the end though, thanks to Jim Cornette, Vader was able to pin Shawn Michaels to score the win for his team. The audience in attendance were sent home happy though with a few power bombs from Sid, and the losers celebrated in the ring afterwards, but backstage Jim Cornette approached Gorilla Monsoon demanding a title match for Vader. Vader versus Shawn Michaels would also take place at SummerSlam. International Incident wasn't a great In Your House pay-per-view, but it's definitely more watchable than the previous Beware of Dog shows. The main event certainly wasn't match of the year, but I do feel it's kinda underrated, so give it a watch if you've nothing better to do. Bash at the Beach was definitely the best pay-per-view of July though. Nitro kicked off with a match between Squire Dave Taylor and Scott Norton. It was an extremely short match and it ended with Norton throwing his opponent over the top rope. They're trying to make Norton a full-blown heel here while wrestling another heel, so it doesn't really work. Mean Gene then interviewed the Horsemen, a group of guys who will main event tonight's episode of Nitro, but Ric Flair is nowhere to be seen. Double A says not to worry, the Nature Boy likes to make an entrance and he'll be there later on. Mongo gets asked about tonight's main event and he says when all is said and done, the pretty boys won't be so pretty. Thanks for that, Mongo. Conan then defeated VK Wall Street in around 5 minutes or so. Not a bad match, but nothing to write home about either. Mean Gene then interviews Sting, Luger and Savage, and Lex Luger thinks Ric Flair is probably sitting in a limousine somewhere. Sting says there's only one guy driving around Orlando in a limousine right now, and it's not the Nature Boy, making reference to Hollywood Hogan. Then there was this weird fucking Baywatch style promo starring Alex Wright, the Renegade, Jim Powers and Joe Gomez. They walk around the Grand Floridian Resort at Disney World and they take their shirts off, and I'm really struggling to see the point in this. Maybe it was for the ladies, I don't know. These four hunks are going to take on the Dungeon of Doom, but Tony Schiavone announces that there's a disturbance backstage. The Outsiders are in the production truck and they're screwing around with the video feed. Security end up escorting Hall and Nash away, and we go back to the 8-man tag. The match ends when the Giant shows up and he chokeslams the babyfaces. Clearly the big man wasn't a fan of that pre-match promotional video, and the Giant then accepts Hulk Hogan's challenge. The Giant versus Hollywood Hogan for the WCW title will main event WCW Hog Wild in Sturgis. Diamond Dallas Page destroyed Prince Iaukea in around 90 seconds. Page got the win with the Diamond Cutter, and Dallas continues to climb up the ranks within WCW. Chavo Guerrero Jr. then made his Nitro debut in a match against Dean Malenko. Both guys were pretty evenly matched here, but Malenko got the win with the Texas Cloverleaf. This final match and the Outsiders showing up in the production truck were the best things that happened during Hour 1. I would be tempted to switch to Raw here to see what happens after International Incident, so Raw gets the unopposed point this week. Raw kicks off with Shawn Michaels celebrating the retrieval of his fanny pack. He just gets in the ring completely smothered with the devil's dandruff, and he does a dance with his new clique buddy Ahmed Johnson. Nah, what really happened here was the show kicked off with Sonny bringing a birthday cake to the ring along with Billy and Bart Gunn, and they were scheduled to take on HBK and Ahmed Johnson in our opening contest. The birthday cake was for HBK, who was celebrating his 31st birthday. The match didn't get started. The Smoking Guns tried to cheap shot the babyfaces, but Billy ended up taking Sweet Chin Music, and Sonny, she got creamed in the face with a birthday cake. Gorilla Monsoon announces that the tag team match will take place later in the show, and if the Smoking Guns refuse, they will forfeit the tag team titles. Our first proper Raw match then features Marc Mero taking on the Goon, while WCW Nitro presents Ice Train vs Meng. Not as manly as Arn Anderson vs Meng, but we'll take it. So, a hockey player turned wrestler, but he still wears his hockey gear. Who comes up with this stuff? Apparently, the Goon was such a badass on the ice that he got kicked out of the sport of ice hockey, and now he's competing in the World Wrestling Federation. Such a deep and emotional story. The gloves come off and the Goon begins attacking Mero, and look at the footwear. Look at this. Bill Irwin can't even run properly while wearing what's supposed to be hockey skates. And man, I don't know what the World Wrestling Federation were thinking around this time period, especially with everything that was going on over on WCW. Steve Austin joins McMahon and Lawler at the commentary desk, and Stone Cold said he opened a can of whoop ass on Marc Mero last night at International Incident. But what's more noteworthy here is that this was the official beginning of the Bret Hart vs Steve Austin rivalry. Austin said he'd like to challenge for the IC and WWF titles, and the other guy he'd like to face one day is Bret Hart. But seeing as the Hitman is gone, Austin says that Stone Cold is now the excellence of execution. The Goon continues to try and wrestle while wearing those boots as Jake Roberts calls into Monday Night Raw. Vince says that Jake had intercostal muscle contractions and this is why he missed International Incident. And Jake really doesn't get a chance to speak here because Jerry the King Lawler begins joking about Jake's problems with booze. Austin begins ripping into Jake too, and Vince has to cut the call off before Jake begins crying like a little baby. The action inside the ring has been extremely dull, and I just keep waiting for the Goon to twist his ankle, but it doesn't happen. The competitors trade punches in the ring while Steve Austin announces that he'll take on The Undertaker next week on Raw. Marc Mero hits a power slam, but his follow-up head scissors gets completely botched. The match spills to the outside, and The Goon slips on the cake icing that wasn't properly cleaned up after the opening segment. Now, I don't know if this was intentional or not, but you gotta appreciate a guy wrestling on fake hockey skates, slipping on cake and falling into steel steps. I really want to believe this was unintentional, but either way, it was ridiculous. Mero performs a flip from the ring to the outside, and the match ends with Mero performing a leg drop from the apron back into the ring. Stupid hockey players aside, there was too much going on here, with Steve Austin building up his future matches and Jake Roberts getting ripped apart by the King. There was no real focus on the match, but hey, maybe that wasn't a bad thing. Meng vs Ice Train on Nitro, and as mentioned before, it doesn't make you feel quite as manly as Arn Anderson vs Meng, and it's all thanks to Ice Train's warm smile and the fact that Meng is just going to completely destroy this poor guy in a matter of seconds. Meng starts things off by beating the crap out of his opponent. A big clothesline from Meng stuns Ice Train, but Train replies with a flying crossbody. Teddy Long is watching the match, and it's crazy how different Teddy looked back in the day, isn't it? Meng and Train share knife-edge chops on the outside, and when we get back inside the ring, Train tries to pin his opponent, but Meng says nope, and another big clothesline gets delivered. Bischoff and Heenan are hyping up Hog Wild by talking about the Hogan vs Giant main event as the match continues on. Bischoff announces that Ice Train vs Scott Norton will also take place in Sturgis on pay-per-view. A jumping clothesline from Train finds its mark, but Meng kicks out. Meng follows up with a few headbutts before applying a camel clutch. Meng then begins destroying Train in the corner, and our guy here has just passed away with all this hot action that's going on inside the ring. You should have gone to WWF Raw tonight, pal. The camera gets splashed with Meng sweat when Train fights back, and a power slam from Train makes this little sweaty dude jump from his seat and hulk up. This bout is having a weird effect on the audience, and I love it. Meng catches Train with a sidekick, and the match goes to the outside once again, but then Scott Norton shows up and he attacks Meng. Norton then tells the fans at home that he wants Ice Train at 100% at Hog Wild, and he wants no excuses. So yeah, Meng wins via DQ. Not a great bout, but still better than the Goon's WWF Raw debut. Time and time again, I read comments from you lovely people about how I'm biased and how Eddie Guerrero doesn't lose points on Reliving the War. Well, let's put that to the test this week. Because of how the shows were formatted here, the Eddie Guerrero vs Psychosis match is going up against two WWF matches, Mankind vs Freddie Floyd, better known as Tracy Smothers, and we also have Goldust vs Barry Harowitz. Let's look at the Raw matches first then and see if I'm still a biased piece of shit who gives Eddie Guerrero points because he isn't one of the best wrestlers of this entire generation. Fuck's sake. Freddie Floyd vs Mankind is an incredibly intriguing matchup when you consider that Cactus Jack and Tracy Smothers were teaming up and competing against each other in IWA Japan the previous year. These two know each other incredibly well, but you just know the WWF would force these guys to play it safe. Before the match, we see Clarence Mason trying to bring a newcomer into the World Wrestling Federation. Gorilla Monsoon is being a little hesitant due to this competitor having problems with the law and being in jail, but all will be revealed soon. Mankind starts the match off with some back elbows, but Smothers is actually allowed to get in some offense. He kicks Mankind out of the ring and he also hits a dropkick, but the momentum stops when he misses a top rope move when Mankind steps out of the way. As Mankind goes on the offense, it's announced that a boiler room brawl will take place at SummerSlam between Mick Foley and The Undertaker. That one is going to be really special and I'm looking forward to watching it again. Freddie Floyd is having a rough time in there as it seems any chance of further offense is out the window. Foley hits a leg drop on the apron before nailing his opponent with a clothesline, and then Smothers gets put in the Tree of Woe. Surprisingly, Floyd gets out of this predicament and he brings the fight back to Mankind. Some unique jumping heel kicks floor McFoley and smothers heads to the top rope, nailing a flying back elbow but only scoring a 2 count. It's surprising because we're used to seeing WWF newcomers get nothing in when they went up against Mankind, so credit where it's due here, at least they were trying to give Smothers a chance. Tracy goes up for another top rope move, but Mankind reads it. The mandible claw gets applied and Foley crotches his opponent on the top rope. It's all over. Mankind puts on the mandible claw once again, and Floyd has no choice but to give up. On the grand scheme of things, it wasn't a great match. It was more interesting thanks to the guys competing in the bout. Brian Pillman joins the commentary team for our next matchup, and Brian again talks about the 7 things you're not allowed to say on TV. You guys who have watched this series from the beginning would remember Pillman talking about the exact same thing at Clash of the Champions back in January. Even Vince McMahon admits that Goldust has given up on the theatrics as of late because the Bizarre One wants to prove himself in the ring, and that's a shame if you ask me. Goldust had just started to get really entertaining here on Reliving the War, and it's a bit of a shame that he's giving that up, at least for the time being. We get a backstage promo with Marc Mero. The Wildman faces Goldust at SummerSlam, and next week Mero will go up against Vader on Raw. Nothing more to say really. This new and apparently more aggressive Goldust starts the match off by going straight after poor Barry Harowitz, and the fight spills to the outside. Goldust lays in a beating before tossing Harowitz back into the ring, and more punishment gets dished out. Vince McMahon wants to know when will Brian Pillman step back into the ring, and Brian says the only thing worse than an ass kicking is waiting for an ass kicking. Pillman stays tight-lipped about his return, and when Vince McMahon calls out Pillman for his colourful language, Brian says it makes people pay attention and it makes Vince McMahon a lot of money. Back inside the ropes, Harowitz gets whipped into the corner twice, and then we see the curtain call. It's over before it even began. Goldust scores the win in another painfully average TV match. Brian Pillman, though, he ends the segment on a high note by saying that Marlena will be getting excited for the upcoming 3-way with her, Sable, and Goldust. This was honestly the highlight of the whole thing. So, can Psychosis and Eddie Guerrero top this? Well, I don't want to be biased, so let's take a look. Before the match takes place, we get a recap of Hulk Hogan's heel turn and the introduction of the New World Order. The voiceover guy promises us that there will be more members added to the NWO, but the big question is, who would that be? And then we see these buildings made of ice. You know what's coming next. It's motherfucking Glacier in all his glory. Finally, we get to see Glacier for the very first time, and he's doing some impressive karate or kung fu or whatever the fuck outside his palace made of ice. I'm so happy that I could cry. Now, this must mean Glacier isn't debuting tonight, but this pretty much confirms it, guys. WCW kept their word. Glacier has arrived, and he must be debuting next week on the final Reliving the War of Glacier month. I knew they wouldn't let us down. Who will he face though? Glacier versus Ice Train makes too much sense. Maybe Glacier will go right to the top and face Sting. What about Glacier battling the Outsiders in a fight for WCW survival? Who knows what will happen, but I can't wait to finally see the debut of Glacier next week. It's going to be the best episode of Nitro ever. Eddie Guerrero versus Psychosis then. The audience are very much behind Eddie here as the two get to work. The mat action is just too quick for Heenan and Bischoff to call, but they do talk about Eddie getting a US title shot at Hog Wild against the Nature Boy Ric Flair. Guerrero moves out of the corner and Psychosis crashes into the turnbuckles hard. An Irish whip sequence follows that results in Psychosis hitting a dropkick, but Eddie replies with a monkey flip followed by a clothesline to the outside. A flying crossbody from the top rope to the outside follows, and Bischoff says that it's action like this that makes WCW the place to be, and I have to agree with him here. A side suplex from Eddie only gets a 2 count, Psychosis gets back in control with an enziguri, and then Psychosis hits a spinning heel kick from the top rope. Eddie falls to the outside and Psychosis hits a suicide dive, and the little dude who hulked up earlier decides to squeal in Eddie's ear as Guerrero tries to sell the attack on the outside. Eddie should have hit that little Marc with a hard slap across the head, knocking that stupid haircut off too while he's at it. Psychosis gets a huge amount of airtime with a top rope leg drop, but Eddie answers with a pin attempt. It only gets 2. An assisted step-up head scissors from Eddie Guerrero excites the crowd and a tilt-a-whirl backbreaker follows, but Eddie again only gets a 2 count. Psychosis comes back with a Hurricane Rana and a falling powerbomb. The audience is going nuts now as Psychosis goes to the top rope for a kinda backflip Harlem Hangover type move. Not sure what to call this, but it looked good. And our match comes to an end with Eddie Guerrero hitting a top rope Frankensteiner before following up with the frog splash. I'm sorry guys, I can't lie and say I enjoyed something when I really didn't. Guerrero vs Psychosis was simply more fun than the 2 Raw matches combined. It was good seeing Tracy on a primetime wrestling show during this era, and Pillman was definitely funny, but when it comes to the in-ring action, Guerrero and Psychosis were just untouchable. Sunny is naturally pissed off that Ahmed Johnson smashed that cake into her face earlier on. I'm sure that's not the first time she's had something smashed in her face, but Sunny says that unlike the Smoking Guns, Shawn and Ahmed don't know how to conduct themselves like champions. Billy says Ahmed and Shawn will see a side of the Smoking Guns that they really don't want to see, and Bart Gunn says Shawn and Ahmed are gonna pay for what they did to Sunny. Jim Cornette then cuts a promo inside the ring with Vader, and it's confirmed here that Vader will get a WWF title match against Shawn Michaels at SummerSlam. Jim says that Vader represents the bully that was at Shawn's school when he was a kid, and that bully has come back all grown up and he's coming for the WWF title. HBK and Ahmed Johnson versus the Smoking Guns then is our Raw main event, while WCW presents the 4 Horsemen versus Sting, Luger and Savage. Mongo, Chris Benoit, Woman, Elizabeth and Deborah come out to the ring, but Arn Anderson and Ric Flair are nowhere to be seen. We come back from a commercial break and Double A is looking inside a white limo, trying to either work out who is inside or where Ric Flair currently is. Anderson gives up and the Horsemen huddle up. Nobody knows what's going on, but it looks like Arn, Benoit and Mongo are going to go this one alone without the Nature Boy. Bischoff and Heenan then discuss the possibility of Ric Flair joining the NWO, but Heenan says there's no way that could ever happen. The babyfaces come to the ring getting a great ovation from the audience, and our match gets underway with Anderson and Sting starting things off. Sting completely takes control and he takes out Double A and Chris Benoit, but Big Steve McMichael stops the Stinger with a shoulder block from the middle rope. Sting ends up on the outside and Benoit gets in a cheap shot, and the Enforcer chokes Sting inside the ropes before Benoit comes back in. Benoit brings the intensity to the Icon in the corner, and then Steve McMichael gets tagged in. You always watch Mongo very closely, just waiting for the inevitable botch fest, but Steve hits a neckbreaker that looks absolutely fine. Sting fires back with a crossbody, but Mongo pulls off a dropkick, and no, it wasn't the most elegant dropkick, but it was still very passable. I've seen worse. Benoit is back in the ring, and again Sting takes a beating as the cameras show us the white limo parked up at the MGM Studios entranceway. Savage once tagged in, but the Stinger can't build any momentum here. The Enforcer is back in, and Sting nearly makes it to his corner, but Mongo stops his opponent from making the tag. And then it happens. Don't know what on earth Mongo is thinking here, but a lack of communication leads to this mess right here. Sting's in a bad place now. He can't get out of the Horseman's corner. The Icon and the Enforcer trade sleeper holds, but Arn ends up getting dropped with a side suplex. This allows Sting to finally make a tag to Lex Luger, and the total package shows a great deal of fire while destroying the Horsemen. All 6 men begin brawling in the ring, and when Mongo asks for his magical briefcase, Woman stops Deborah from handing it over. This was quite strange, and it leads to Randy Savage taking control and smacking Chris Benoit with the most devastating weapon in WCW history. The ref doesn't see it, Luger pins Benoit, and the match is over just like that. Randy Savage didn't even get tagged in here, and yeah, it's another example of a poor WCW main event mixed with a decent mid-card showing. Mean Gene interviews the babyfaces afterwards. It's announced that Sting and Luger will face the Outsiders at Hog Wild. Sting says Hog Wild will be a real bad day for Hall and Nash. Luger says the Outsiders have pushed all the wrong buttons since coming to WCW, and if they wanted Luger, Sting and Savage to get mad, well, now they've got it. Savage sends a message to Hulk Hogan. The Macho Man says that Hogan won't even make it down the ramp at Sturgis, and Savage won't hesitate to destroy Hogan in front of all his biker buddies. Quite a disappointing end to Nitro then, not much going on in terms of storyline, and the match itself was mediocre at best. The question is though, where was the Nature Boy Ric Flair? The World Wrestling Federation are dedicating a lot of time to this main event, and it kinda messed up the formatting this week, but here we go. The WWF Champ and the IC Champ versus the Tag Team Champs. The Smoking Guns dash to the ring, but their offense gets thwarted by the babyfaces. Billy and Bart take a timeout on the outside, while Shawn taunts Sonny. It's like a love-hate relationship here, isn't it? Billy and Shawn start things off. A few right hands from HBK stuns Billy Gunn, and Billy again gets sent back to the outside. Shawn takes the time to high-five fans before bringing the drugstore cowboy back into the ring. Ahmed comes into the match, and Ahmed shows off his strength by lifting Billy up by the arm and slamming him to the mat. We go to commercial break, and when we come back we have Shawn in the ring momentarily, and then we move over to Bart and Ahmed, and Vince needs to watch what he says on commentary here. McMahon says, and I quote, "What a threesome we saw last night with Shawn Michaels, Ahmed Johnson and Psycho Sid. This must have been some sort of post-show special attraction to send fans home happy, or very sad, whatever way you want to look at it." Loads of three-way talk tonight on Raw though, quite weird. Bart Gunn stops Ahmed's momentum with a stun gun before Billy comes back into the match. Ahmed is able to take care of Billy with, I guess it's a power slam, and Shawn comes in with a double axe handle from the top rope. Shawn hits a head scissors, but a Hurricane Rana spot gets reversed and the Smoking Guns drop HBK across the top rope. This looked pretty good. Bart Gunn continues using the ropes to his advantage when HBK gets press slammed, and the Smoking Guns do some double team work to slow down the WWF Champion. Billy Gunn gets distracted by the fans cheering for Michaels, and HBK pays for it by taking the Ric Flair corner bump, sending Shawn right out of the ring. Sonny and Bart get in a cheap shot on the outside, and it looks like HBK is now in trouble. He needs to tag out. Gotta give it to this crowd too, by the way. This is the loudest a Raw audience has been in a long time. Shawn tags in Ahmed, but the referee doesn't see it. HBK takes a kicking in the corner just before we take our final commercial break, and when we come back, Michaels is still getting cut off from his corner. More double team work from Billy and Bart keeps the champion in a bad position, and I'm honestly expecting the roof to blow off the key arena when Ahmed gets tagged into the match. An opening gets created when Shawn smashes Billy and Bart's heads together. Ahmed gets the tag and the audience goes nuts for the Pearl River Powerhouse. Ahmed destroys the Smoking Guns before hitting a spine buster on Billy, but it looks like the adrenaline wore off when he falls out of the ring thanks to Bart Gunn. And then some dude wearing a blue gladiator outfit and a silver tinfoil hat runs down to attack Ahmed. The match gets thrown out as this guy decimates the IC champion, and Jerry Lawler says that this looks like Ron Simmons. Shawn makes the save and it looks like Sonny has brought Ron Simmons to the World Wrestling Federation, but I can only imagine the collective groan heard around the world when Simmons came out to the ring dressed like this. Simmons and Sonny go back up the entranceway, and Pat Patterson has to come out and whisper that there's still a few minutes of TV time remaining because Sonny and Simmons go right back to the crime scene for another fight. Ridiculous gladiator outfit aside, the final point goes to Monday Night Raw. The main event match was simply better. This week we have a draw, and really it comes down to the matches and promos not matching up in order to fairly compare segments, but in saying that I also think neither show was better than the other. Not a lot happening this week on Raw and Nitro, and both the WWF and WCW's offerings were kinda mediocre. Overall then, Raw has 14 points, Nitro has 22 points, and we've now had 6 ties. Nitro gets another TV ratings win this week with a 2.6 over Raw's 2.2. The gap was closed a little this week, but it wasn't because more people watched WWF Raw, but rather less people watched WCW Nitro. The WWF actually had more viewers last week. Psycho Sid takes on Justin Hawk Bradshaw, and The Undertaker meets Steve Austin in the ring next week on Raw, while the NWO bring absolute chaos to WCW Nitro and the Disney MGM studios. Plus, the long-awaited debut of Glacier. It's finally arrived, guys. I hope you join me next week. Thank you for watching, and take care.